Joining us now to discuss the changes to the final bill is my old colleague, the chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, Jeff Miller of Florida. Jeff, we welcome you back to America's Forum.
Now look here, J.D., you're older than I am. I'm just a former colleague, not an old colleague.
Oh, okay. We'll get that straight. And for purposes of full disclosure, Jeff is well trained in communications and broadcast journalism. So we'll take that point, Mr. Chairman. Now,
hey, things are moving. We're going to have a vote, as you've already said, in the House today. I would hope the Senate would vote tomorrow. They may wait, I guess, till Friday. But the fact is that this piece of legislation will be on its way to the president's desk, if he's there and not off fundraising or playing golf, to sign.
Well, it's interesting you use that conciliatory term toward the president to get his signature. Now listen. We always, here in Washington, the definition of a compromise is that both sides come away disappointed. There's something that some people don't like. The thing that hit me, and correct me about this if I'm wrong, $2 billion in miscellaneous funds in what's supposed to be a health care bill? What gives?
What the VA asked for was $17.5 billion. And that was to hire 10,000 more health care workers, $6 billion for a major construction and facilities. And what we ended up compromising is that we are going to give VA a part of what they were asking for. We're not going to allow them to spend $1 billion for IT. They can hire more health care workers if that's what's necessary, and they can do some deferred maintenance and small leases and small construction projects, but not fund hospitals that are going to take 10 years to get built. So, yes, there is some money in there for VA, but here's the most important thing. There's $10 billion in there for access to care at private facilities. VA no longer controls whether the veteran gets to go there or not. They have to let them go. And it's going to be a very important test to see if veterans are going to leave the system, stay in the system, or use both.
Yeah, Chairman, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that, because something that struck me, and as I mentioned a second ago, is the fact that I know you'd also talked about your ability, your past experience as a salesman, but how did you sell Bernie Sanders, the socialist, on the idea that this was necessary, that these vets need to go outside of a government-run healthcare situation into a private sector healthcare situation?
Well, it's really the only way that veterans are assured of getting off waiting lists, and we hopefully will prevent them from lying again and having these secret waiting lists. Again, no legislation is going to stop somebody who is immoral or who wants to cheat the system. That's a culture that the new secretary is going to have to change, and unfortunately, that's not going to change overnight. But let me tell you, Bernie wanted, when you take the $35 billion original Senate bill, add the 17.5 to that, you got about $52 billion that he wanted mandatory emergency spending on. We now are going to come down to a bill that, after the offsets, CBO says will score at about $10 billion.
So any advice for the new CEO? Yeah, go ahead.
The new secretary doesn't need my advice other than to keep plowing through and don't trust the numbers that his people are bringing to him. Unfortunately, Secretary Shinseki believed his people rather than folks on the outside, and now, he's somewhat shell-shocked and saying, I can't believe all these people lied to me. The new secretary, who I've had a chance to visit with, I've said I want to be a partner, just as Bernie Sanders wants to be a partner to help strengthen the VA, but there's two diametrically opposed ideas. Bernie wants to put more money, more people, more sticks and bricks. I want to get VA back to its core mission and allow veterans to go outside for private care for things that actually has helped to increase the waiting times, and that is primary care.
Jeff, you talked about the situation right there with the new secretary, Mr. McDonald, coming into the position. with that great business background as a CEO. But there's something else in this bill that, even as it's being trumpeted, I'm looking at a loophole, I guess. This is the notion that the secretary has the ability to fire his upper level management. What about mid-level managers? What about workers directly with patients who may be falsifying stuff?
Hey, we're getting there. This is, if you could get Bernie Sanders to agree to allow anybody to be fired, that is a step in the right direction. And what we said was, we need to be able to hold some of the senior managers accountable. I want to be able to make sure that VA will not, and I don't expect them to go out and wholesale fire everybody, and then we'll start moving to more folks. I mean, the civil service protections that exist out there today are so strong, you absolutely cannot get rid of a federal worker, and that is not right. I understand somebody needs to be protected from retribution by a boss that may be mad at them, but if they're not doing their job or they're doing it illegally or inappropriately, they need to go.
Jeff, there's so much going on here, and obviously, while you're working on this Veterans Affairs bill and getting this done, events continue on in the world. You also have more than a casual interest in what happens with armed services based on your Pensacola district and the big naval air base there. So let's talk about Israel and the peace process. We have a clip from former Israeli defense official Danny Danon on Newsmax TV. We'd like to listen to that, then get your reaction.
He was yelling and telling Prime Minister Netanyahu what he should do and what he should not do. And I tell you frankly, we have a very close relationship with the U.S., the strongest ally of Israel. But this is not a way to treat the leader of an ally country.
Danny Danon talking about the relationship between the Prime Minister of Israel and the Secretary of State of the United States. Has Israel just tried to put its best face on what is a deteriorating relationship?
There's no question this administration has done more to alienate that very important ally of ours in this process. And I can tell you, there's no love lost between Secretary Kerry and myself. I think he's got a cloud over his head almost everywhere he goes. He's a bull in the china
yelling
boat.
Well, mindful of that, do you think Secretary Kerry should continue in his job? Is it time for him to resign?
I was shocked that they put him in the job in the first place. It's time for him to go. And, you know, I mean, Hillary Clinton didn't do anything but rack up a bunch of miles. Secretary Kerry has done less than she did.
All right, Arte, and this is something that bears repeating. You're making news here, Jeff Miller, as the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, as a member of Congress who deals with the armed forces and armed services on a daily basis. You are saying our Secretary of State needs to go.
I'm saying our Secretary of State is not doing an adequate job. He's representing our country poorly, and I believe that somebody else could do it better.
What does he need to do differently, though?
Well, again, don't alienate our allies. I mean, everywhere he goes, he seems to not have the ability to deliver a clear, concise message, except maybe his president and the person that's in the Oval Office is telling him to do what he's doing. If that's the case, again, I didn't support President Obama when he was elected the first time, nor reelected, and it's going to take a long time to repair the foreign policy damage that has been done, not only in Israel, but around the globe.
About a minute 15 remains. Jeff, before we let you go, the upcoming bill on the border, your neighbor, Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, says don't pass this thing. It gives essentially license to a lawless administration. Do you agree with Jeff Sessions?
I am a great friend of the senator. I will be voting for the bill. It's easy to be in the minority and vote no and point out the bad things that are in there, but I believe that we have got to help secure the border, and one of those ways is exactly what Governor Perry has done, is sending the National Guard down to the border, and what this bill will do is allow the federal government to pay for the costs of mobilizing those individuals down to the border, and they need to be doing real work while they're down there.
All right. Thank you very much. Congressman Jeff Miller, chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. We appreciate your time and thanks for making news here today. Well, it's interesting to hear from Jeff. He made news earlier this week with the bill that'll be voted on, but he's unequivocally saying Secretary of State Kerry needs to resign.
We did that look back 10 years ago this week. John Kerry nominated to be the Democratic nominee for president.
Shows what can happen.
10 years is a long time.